The lukewarm dregs of cheap coffee hit Chloe's crisp white blouse like a slap. It seeped through the thin cotton, clinging unpleasantly to her skin, the acrid smell instantly overpowering the sterile office air. Madison Rossi stood frozen, the empty paper cup dangling from her perfectly manicured fingers, her eyes wide with a theatrical, utterly insincere, "Oh, my God!" Silence crashed over the open-plan office of Viridian Ventures. Every head swiveled. The low hum of computers died. Chloe felt the heat rush to her face, a scalding counterpoint to the cold coffee spreading across her chest. 20 pairs of eyes, curious, amused, pitying, locked onto her. Her carefully constructed professional facade, the armor she'd donned for her first real job after scraping through community college while waitressing nights, shattered in an instant. "Clumsy me," Madison trilled, her voice dripping with saccharine concern that didn't reach her icy blue eyes. She didn't move to help, didn't offer a napkin, just stood there, a vision in designer's silk, letting the moment stretch, savoring Chloe's humiliation. "You really should watch where you're standing, Chloe, especially near the important files." She gestured vaguely towards the overflowing inbox on Chloe's desk, the one perpetually stacked with tasks no one else wanted. Chloe's jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. "Watch where I'm standing." Madison had pivoted sharply, deliberately, as Chloe walked back from the break room. This wasn't clumsiness. It was target practice. And Chloe was the bullseye. Again. A low snicker came from Brad Miller's cubicle. He quickly covered it with a cough, but the damage was done. Brad, Madison's lapdog and resident tech bro, found her perpetual torment of the new girl endlessly entertaining. Chloe's gaze swept past Madison's smug face, past Brad's poorly concealed smirk, landing finally on the glass-walled corner office. Inside, leaning back in his expensive ergonomic chair, was Simon Thorne, her mentor, supposedly. He met her gaze for a fraction of a second, then deliberately looked down at his phone, a faint dismissive curve on his lips. That was the real sting. Not the coffee, not Madison's theatrics, not even Brad's juvenile snicker. It was Simon's indifference. He'd plucked her from a pool of interns 6 months ago, praising her raw tenacity and unconventional perspective. He'd promised mentorship, growth. Instead, he'd fed her to the wolves, using her eagerness to offload his tedious work while subtly encouraging the office dynamic that painted her as the incompetent outsider. He enjoyed watching her scramble, watching the sharks circle. It was his twisted form of team building, or perhaps just his entertainment. A wave of nausea, hot and sour, rose in Chloe's throat. The familiar cocktail of shame and helpless fury threatened to drown her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to dump the entire contents of her overflowing inbox over Madison's perfectly highlighted head. She wanted to storm into Simon's office and demand, what? Respect? Dignity? In Viridian Ventures, those commodities seemed reserved for those born with silver spoons and Ivy League connections, not for scholarship kids from a Rust Belt town who still carried the faint scent of diner grease. "Clean that up, would you?" Madison's command sliced through the thick silence. She dropped the empty cup onto Chloe's desk with a dismissive flick. "Before it stains the carpet. God knows you can't afford the replacement." She turned on her stiletto heel, her laughter tinkling like broken glass, and sauntered back towards her own pristine workstation. Chloe stood rooted to the spot, the cooling coffee a sticky, shameful brand. The eyes were still on her. Pity, judgment, amusement. She forced herself to move, her limbs heavy and uncoordinated. She grabbed a wad of scratchy paper towels from the break room dispenser, avoiding the few sympathetic glances offered by the quieter staff members. Back at her desk, she dabbed futilely at the dark brown splotch spreading across her chest. Each dab felt like erasing a piece of herself. This wasn't just a coffee spill. It was a baptism into perpetual inadequacy in this glittering, soulless world. As she scrubbed, her gaze fell on her computer screen. It displayed a half-finished market analysis report. Simon's work, of course, passed off to her late yesterday with a breezy, "Just polish this up, Chloe. Show me what you've learned." The data was complex. The conclusions Simon had dictated were flimsy, designed to flatter a potential client rather than reflect reality. She'd stayed late, poring over the numbers, spotting inconsistencies, identifying a more promising, albeit less flashy, angle. She'd been excited to show Simon her insights, proof that she was more than just a glorified gopher. Now, looking at the report, then down at the coffee stain, a cold, hard clarity settled over her. The tears burning behind her eyes didn't fall. They evaporated, replaced by a glacial calm. Excitement? Hope? Those were luxuries she couldn't afford here. Simon wouldn't care about her insights. He'd either take credit or, more likely, dismiss them as the naive ramblings of the coffee-stained intern. Her value here was defined by her ability to absorb humiliation and keep fetching metaphorical coffee. A memory surfaced, sharp and unexpected. Her grandmother, hands gnarled from decades in a factory, stirring a bubbling pot of her famous sour cherry jam in the tiny, steamy kitchen. "Life throws sour fruit at you, child," she'd rasped, her voice thick with an accent Chloe could still hear. "You got two choices. You let it rot you from the inside, bitter and spoiled. Or," she'd pause, tapping the wooden spoon against the pot, a glint in her faded eyes, "you add sugar, a lot of sugar. You cook it down slow. You turn that sourness into something so sweet, so thick, so irresistible. They'll be begging for a taste, not even remembering where it started." She'd handed Chloe a spoonful of the ruby-red jam, its intense sweetness perfectly balanced by the underlying tartness. "That's real power, Chloe, making something beautiful from the mess." The sticky paper towel crumpled in Chloe's fist. Sugar. The word echoed in the hollow space left by her shattered pride. Not literal sugar, but strategy, patience, leverage. Turning the sour fruit Madison, Brad, Simon, this whole toxic environment represented, into something they would desperately crave. Something that would make them choke on their own smugness. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't quit. Not yet. Quitting meant they won. It meant she was exactly what they thought she was. Disposable. Weak. She looked at the market analysis again. Her findings were good, solid, insightful. They revealed a niche Simon and his cronies were too arrogant to see, a gap in the market serving small, local artisans, bakers, crafters, independent coffee roasters, struggling to compete with online giants and big-box stores. Viridian Ventures chased unicorns. They wouldn't bother with these mom-and-pop nothings. But Chloe saw something else. Authenticity. Passion. A market hungry for personalized support. Not just generic venture capital buzzwords. A plan, fragile but fierce, began to crystallize. It wasn't fully formed, more a defiant ember glowing in the wreckage. She wouldn't show Simon his report. She'd finish it, perfectly, anonymously. But her real insights, those were hers. Seeds. Seeds she would plant elsewhere, nurture in secret. She meticulously cleaned the coffee spill, her movements precise, controlled. She changed into the spare blouse she kept in her bottom drawer, slightly too big, a thrift store find, but clean. She smoothed her hair, took a deep, steadying breath that filled her lungs with resolve, not despair. The humiliation still burned, but now it fueled a different fire, a cold, focused flame. When Madison walked past later, tossing a stack of invoices onto Chloe's desk with a curt, "By EOD," Chloe didn't flinch. She looked up, met Madison's expectant gaze, and offered a small, utterly neutral smile. "Of course, Madison." Madison blinked, momentarily wrong-footed by the lack of cowering or resentment. She recovered quickly, tossing her hair. "See that you do?" As Madison walked away, Chloe's fingers flew over the keyboard, not starting on the invoices, but opening a new private document. The heading was simple, bold: Project Phoenix, Artisan Uplift. The taste of cheap coffee still lingered faintly in her mouth. But beneath it, Chloe swore she could taste the first faint hint of something else. Something potent. Something sweet. Part 2. The Grind. The next 6 months were a masterclass in controlled combustion. Chloe became a ghost in the machine at Viridian Ventures, present but unseen for anything beyond her menial tasks. She perfected the art of invisibility. Her reports were flawless, submitted silently via email, never seeking acknowledgement. She anticipated Simon's needs before he voiced them, becoming an indispensable, yet utterly forgettable, cog. She absorbed Madison's petty torments, the accidentally deleted files, the last-minute scheduling nightmares, the snide remarks about her thrift store wardrobe, with a serene, unreadable expression she practiced in the bathroom mirror. "Thank you for pointing that out, Madison." "I'll handle it immediately, Madison." The politeness was a shield, impenetrable and chillingly polite. Meanwhile, Project Phoenix consumed every waking moment outside the office. Sleep became a luxury. Her tiny apartment, already cramped, transformed into a war room. The rickety kitchen table groaned under stacks of library books on business law, marketing, supply chain management, and finance. Her laptop, an ancient relic wheezing under the strain, glowed late into the night. Post-it notes in her precise handwriting covered the walls. Market research, competitor analysis, potential supplier lists, cost projections. Her target was clear: the overlooked, undervalued, passionate local artisans. The baker whose sourdough was legendary, but whose online presence was non-existent. The ceramicist whose mugs felt like holding captured sunlight, but who struggled with pricing and wholesale orders. The single mom roasting small-batch coffee in her garage, her beans superior to anything on supermarket shelves, but invisible to the masses. Chloe started small, leveraging the only network she had outside Viridian, the diner where she still worked weekends. Darla, the gruff but kind-hearted owner, became her first unofficial advisor and connection hub. "You got that look in your eye, kid," Darla had grunted, wiping down the counter after a busy brunch shift. "The I'm done taking crap look. What you scheming?" Tentatively, Chloe shared the bare bones of her idea, a service to help small food and craft producers thrive, handling the business headaches so they could focus on creating. Darla had nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Betty down at the farmer's market, her jams? Divine, but she's hopeless with the books. Nearly got swindled last month." She scribbled Betty's number on a napkin. "Tell her I sent ya. Don't screw her over." Betty became Chloe's first client, a trial run. Pro bono. Chloe spent evenings hunched over Betty's chaotic receipts, creating a simple inventory system, setting up a basic Square account, designing clean labels that reflected the jam's homemade quality, and listing her products on a small local online marketplace. She negotiated a tiny consignment deal with a hip new cafe downtown. Within a month, Betty's sales increased by 30. and the stress lines on her face softened. "You're an angel, Chloe," Betty had exclaimed, pressing a jar of her best strawberry rhubarb into Chloe's hands. "Payment enough? For now." Word spread slowly through Darla's diner network and the local farmers' markets. Chloe took on 2 more clients. Matteo, the intense perfectionist baker obsessed with heritage grains, and Anya, the Ukrainian immigrant whose intricate embroidered linens were works of art. Each client was a crash course. She learned about food safety certifications with Matteo, navigating international shipping regulations for Anya's overseas online sales, and the delicate art of pricing handmade goods so the maker could actually earn a living wage. Her office was often Darla's back booth after hours, the smell of fry grease a constant companion. Her budget was non-existent. She reinvested every spare cent from her diner job and Viridian paycheck, meager as it was, into essential tools: a basic website builder subscription, a professional email domain, ChloeArtisanUplift.com. It felt terrifyingly real when she hit purchase. And cheap but decent business cards she designed herself. The biggest hurdle was confidence, theirs and hers. These artisans were brilliant creators, but often deeply insecure about the business side. Chloe discovered her unexpected strength lay not just in crunching numbers, but in translation. She could take their passion, their unique stories, and frame them in a language that resonated with buyers and retailers. She became their champion, their translator, their fierce protector against predatory contracts and lowball offers. She learned to negotiate not with Viridian's bluster, but with quiet, unshakable preparation and a deep understanding of her client's true worth. One rainy Tuesday, hunched over her Viridian desk pretending to reconcile expense reports while actually drafting a social media calendar for Matteo's bakery, Simon Thorne materialized beside her. Chloe startled, slamming her laptop lid down a fraction too quickly. "Something personal, Chloe?" Simon asked, his voice smooth, his eyes sharp. He rested a hand on her cubicle wall, leaning in slightly, invading her carefully maintained bubble of anonymity. "Just catching up on industry newsletters, Mr. Thorne," she lied smoothly, meeting his gaze with practiced neutrality. "Always trying to learn." Simon studied her for a long moment. The office hummed around them. Madison watched from her desk, a vulture sensing potential carrion. Simon finally said. "Dedication. I like that. We have a new prospect. Urban Grind, that boutique coffee chain looking to expand. Their founder is eccentric, thinks he knows everything, needs handling with kid gloves. I want you to do a deep dive, competitive analysis, potential pitfalls, the works, dig up everything, make it shine, by Friday." It was a massive task, deliberately so, a test or perhaps just another way to bury her. But Chloe saw something else. Urban Grind was exactly the kind of mid-sized growing business that Artisan Uplift could potentially serve. Understanding their expansion strategy, their pain points, from the inside? That wasn't just busy work. It was intelligence gold. "Of course, Mr. Thorne," Chloe said, her voice steady. "I'll get right on it." As Simon walked away, a slow, genuine smile touched Chloe's lips for the first time in months. "Thank you, Simon." She worked furiously. By day, she was the diligent Viridian analyst, compiling data on Urban Grind, their competitors, their market positioning. By night, she filtered that data through the lens of Artisan Uplift. She identified the specific logistical challenges a rapidly expanding coffee chain might face sourcing consistent, high-quality pastries, challenges a network of skilled local bakers, coordinated efficiently, could solve. She noted Urban Grind's emphasis on local partnerships, in their marketing, recognizing the gap between their rhetoric and their current reliance on large, impersonal suppliers. Her Viridian report would be thorough, insightful even, but carefully framed to maintain Viridian's focus on high-level investment. The real insights, the actionable connections, went straight into the Phoenix files. Friday came. Chloe submitted her meticulously crafted 30-page report on Urban Grind to Simon. He skimmed the executive summary, grunted what might have been approval, and dismissed her with a wave. No praise, no feedback. Just another task completed. That weekend, fueled by greasy diner coffee and sheer adrenaline, Chloe drafted a different proposal. Not for Viridian, for Artisan Uplift. It outlined a pilot program. Local Bites, Urban Delights. A curated selection of pastries from 3 exceptional local bakers, including Matteo, whose skills were now honed and presentation polished thanks to her guidance. Delivered fresh daily to select Urban Grind locations. She included cost comparisons showing potential savings over their current supplier, highlighted the unique selling points and stories of the bakers, translated into compelling marketing copy, and proposed a revenue-sharing model. On Monday, using a newly acquired, untraceable prepaid phone, she called Urban Grind's main line. She asked for the head of procurement, adopting a confident, slightly brisk tone she'd practiced. "Hi, this is Chloe Carter calling from Artisan Uplift Consulting. I have a proposal regarding your local sourcing initiative that I believe could significantly enhance Urban Grind's community presence and product quality. Could I email it over for your consideration?" To her astonishment, she got the email address. Hitting send on that proposal felt like jumping off a cliff, but the freefall was exhilarating, not terrifying. This was her move, her sugar starting to simmer. The days that followed were agony. She checked the untraceable email obsessively, jumping at every notification on her Viridian computer. She forced herself to focus on Madison's latest demand, organizing Simon's disastrously chaotic contact database. The mind-numbing task was almost a relief. Then, Wednesday afternoon, while Chloe was wrist-deep in alphabetizing Thorne's forgotten acquaintances, her prepaid phone buzzed in her bag, a local number she didn't recognize. Heart hammering against her ribs, she ducked into the rarely used stairwell. "Chloe Carter?" A no-nonsense female voice. "Yes, speaking." "Janice Walsh, head of procurement, Urban Grind. Got your proposal. It's interesting, unorthodox. Can you come in tomorrow, 3 p.m.? Bring samples, especially this Matteo's rye croissant." "My boss is skeptical, but I'm curious." Chloe leaned against the cool concrete wall, the world tilting slightly. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. "Absolutely. Samples will be there. Thank you, Miss Walsh." She ended the call, pressing the phone to her forehead. A laugh, sharp and disbelieving, escaped her. This was happening. She was happening. Walking back into the Viridian bullpen, the fluorescent lights seemed brighter, the air less stifling. Madison was berating Brad about a misplaced lunch order. Simon was yelling into his phone behind glass. Chloe sat down at her desk, a small secret fire burning in her chest. She opened the contact database file. Bring samples. Matteo. She needed to call him immediately. And Darla. She'd need a ride. Her ancient car wasn't reliable enough for precious pastry transport. The grind continued, but the axis had shifted. She was no longer just surviving Viridian. She was using it as a stepping stone, a source of intel, and perversely, the financial fuel for her escape. The sour fruit was in the pot, the heat was on, and the first tantalizing whiff of something sweet was beginning to rise. Part 3. The Rise. The meeting at Urban Grind was a high-wire act performed on 3 hours of sleep and pure caffeinated nerve. Chloe arrived 15 minutes early, carefully balancing a pastry box containing Matteo's masterpieces, the rye croissants, naturally leavened rolls glistening with seeds, and miniature galettes showcasing seasonal fruit. Darla, bless her, had insisted on driving, muttering about moral support, and secretly hoping for a leftover croissant. Janice Walsh was exactly as her voice suggested, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in impeccably tailored separates that meant business. Her boss, Evan Torres, the eccentric founder Simon had mentioned, was a whirlwind of energy in a slightly rumpled linen shirt, his skepticism evident in the way he drummed his fingers on the conference table. Chloe laid out her proposal concisely, her voice clear and steady, despite the butterflies staging a revolt in her stomach. She focused on the tangible benefits: superior product freshness, Matteo baked pre-dawn, delivery by 7 a.m., unique offerings unavailable from large suppliers, authentic local stories that resonated with Urban Grind's target demographic, and streamlined logistics handled entirely by Artisan Uplift. She presented cost projections, sample social media posts featuring the bakers, and testimonials from Betty and Anya, carefully edited to maintain confidentiality. Evan interrupted frequently, questioning scalability, consistency, liability. Chloe anticipated every objection, her answers backed by the research she'd done for Viridian and her hands-on experience with her clients. She spoke of micro-batches ensuring peak freshness, rigorous quality control partnerships, and shared risk models. When Evan scoffed at the price point compared to their industrial supplier, Chloe didn't flinch. She picked up one of Matteo's rye croissants, its layers impossibly delicate, the aroma of toasted grain and butter filling the room. "Taste is the ultimate cost-benefit analysis, Mr. Torres," she said, placing it on a napkin in front of him. "This isn't just a pastry. It's craftsmanship. Your customers aren't just buying coffee. They're buying an experience. This," she gestured to the croissant, "elevates that experience. It tells them Urban Grind cares about quality, about community. That has value. Measure that." Janice watched, a flicker of approval in her eyes. Evan hesitated, then picked up the croissant. He took a bite, chewed slowly. His skeptical expression softened, then transformed into genuine surprise. "Damn," he muttered, crumbs dusting his chin. "That's exceptional." He finished it in 3 more bites. "Okay," he said, wiping his hands. "Pilot program, 3 stores, 2 weeks, prove it." The handshake Chloe gave Janice Walsh was firm. The one she gave Evan Torres was triumphant. Outside in Darla's idling car, Chloe let out a whoop that startled a passing pigeon. "We got it, Darla. We got the pilot." Darla grinned, a rare full-faced expression. "Told you had the look, kid." Now about that croissant. The pilot was a crucible. Chloe became a logistical ninja. Her phone buzzed constantly. Matteo needing a last-minute flour delivery, a cafe manager complaining a delivery was 5 minutes late, Evan Torres emailing at midnight with a brilliant and complicated new idea. She coordinated baking schedules, optimized delivery routes using a battered GPS and sheer intuition, handled invoicing, and acted as the constant communication hub. She still worked weekends at the diner and weekdays at Viridian, functioning on caffeine fumes and sheer willpower. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under her eyes, but they were badges of honor, not shame. The results spoke for themselves. Sales of the local pastries at the 3 Urban Grind pilot locations soared, far exceeding projections. Customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive, specifically mentioning the amazing, unique, local treats. Social media buzzed with photos tagged urban delights. Janice Walsh became a staunch ally, impressed by Chloe's professionalism and problem-solving under pressure. Within a month, Evan Torres, convinced by both the numbers and the buzz, greenlit a full rollout to all 12 urban grind locations in the metropolitan area. Artisan Uplift wasn't just viable, it was thriving. Chloe could finally pay herself a meager salary, allowing her to quit the diner job. She hired her first part-time employee, Raj, a whip-smart, recently laid-off logistics coordinator she met at a small business networking event Darla dragged her to. His organizational skills were a godsend. The news rippled through the local artisan community. Artisan Uplift's client list grew steadily. Chloe was selective, focusing on quality, passion, and a good fit. She wasn't just building a business, she was building a community. She organized a small, successful pop-up market featuring her clients, fostering connections between makers and directly with customers. The sense of collective empowerment was palpable and deeply rewarding. Back at Viridian Ventures, Chloe became even more ghost-like. She performed her duties with robotic efficiency, her mind constantly elsewhere, strategizing for Anya's upcoming craft fair, negotiating a deal with a boutique hotel for Mateo's pastries, refining the Artisan Uplift website. The office antics of Madison and Brad seemed smaller, more pathetic, viewed through the lens of her burgeoning success. Simon's occasional attempts to engage her in mentorship chats felt hollow and irritating. She answered politely, offering nothing beyond what was required. One afternoon, while Chloe was finalizing a complex shipping quote for Anya's international orders, Simon buzzed her intercom. "Chloe, my office, now." His voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. She saved her work, took a steadying breath, and walked in. Simon wasn't alone. Madison stood beside his desk, radiating smug satisfaction. Brad lurked near the door, trying to look important. "Close the door, Chloe," Simon said, his expression unreadable. He gestured to a report open on his screen. It was her urban grind analysis, the one she'd done for him months ago. This report, it's thorough, surprisingly insightful in parts. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," Chloe said neutrally. Madison couldn't contain herself. "We also noticed something interesting, Simon. Urban grind. They just signed this huge deal with some mom-and-pop consultancy." She spat the words. "Artisan Uplift. Ring any bells, Chloe?" Chloe's blood ran cold, but her face remained impassive. How? She'd been so careful. Simon leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Indeed. A rather significant contract bypassing established firms, including potentially us." His gaze sharpened, boring into her. "Brad here is quite the digital sleuth. Found some interesting cross-references. Mentions of Artisan Uplift tied to an email address that, upon deeper inspection," he paused dramatically, "traces back to you, Chloe, or at least to activity originating from your home IP address during non-working hours. Care to explain?" The trap snapped shut. Brad's sleuthing. Madison's vindictiveness. Simon's opportunism. They hadn't found concrete proof of wrongdoing at Viridian, but they'd found her secret. They smelled blood. Chloe didn't deny it. Denial was weak. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a flicker of the cold fire from the coffee-stained day igniting in her eyes. "Artisan Uplift is my company, Mr. Thorne. Legally registered, operating entirely outside Viridian Ventures' business hours, using my own resources. It doesn't compete with Viridian's investment focus. We serve entirely different markets." Madison snorted. "Using company resources? using company time. That report. She pointed at Simon's screen. You used what you learned here to build your little side hustle. Did I? Chloe's voice was dangerously calm. The report I submitted to you, Mr. Thorne, focused on Urban Grind's financial viability as a potential investment target for Viridian. It analyzed market share, competitor threats, potential ROI for a venture capital firm. Artisan Uplift's proposal to Urban Grind was about solving their operational sourcing challenges through local partnerships. Different objectives, different solutions. The market data is publicly available. My interpretation and application for Artisan Uplift were developed independently. Simon's eyes narrowed. Be that as it may, Chloe, the perception. He spread his hands. Conflict of interest, using Viridian's infrastructure, however indirectly. Infrastructure? Chloe almost laughed. My personal laptop? My home internet? My evenings and weekends? Viridian doesn't own my time or my brain outside contracted hours, Mr. Thorne. My contract, she continued, her voice gaining steel, has no non-compete clause for unrelated industries. I checked, thoroughly, before I started. She'd spent hours with a law student she'd met at the library, poring over employment law. She was prepared for this. The office was silent. Madison looked furious, cheated of her big moment. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Simon studied Chloe, a new grudging assessment in his gaze. The timid intern who absorbed coffee spills was gone. In her place stood someone unnervingly calm, prepared and utterly unafraid. This endeavor, Simon said slowly, choosing his words carefully. It seems to be consuming your focus. Perhaps Viridian is no longer the right fit for your ambitions. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal wrapped in faux concern. The final push out the door. Chloe looked at Simon, then at Madison's triumphant sneer, then at Brad's awkward shuffle. The taste of cheap coffee was a distant memory. Now she tasted only anticipation. Sweet, sharp anticipation. You're right, Mr. Thorne, Chloe said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. It wasn't the smile of defeat, but of liberation. Viridian is no longer the right fit for my ambitions. Consider this my resignation, effective immediately. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out of Simon's office, past the stunned faces in the bullpen, straight to her cubicle. She pulled out a single tote bag. She'd kept it ready for weeks. She placed her Viridian keycard neatly on the desk, gathered her personal mug, a chipped one Anya had given her decorated with sunflowers, and the small succulent she'd nurtured. Nothing else belonged to her here. As she walked out of Viridian Ventures for the last time, the glass doors closing behind her with a soft hiss, she didn't look back. She took a deep breath of the city air, thick with exhaust and possibility. The weight of their expectations, their judgments, their petty cruelties slid off her shoulders. She was free. The revenge wasn't dramatic. It wasn't screaming or sabotage. It was walking away, head high, while her creation, born from their sourness, nurtured by her resilience, was just beginning to soar. And the sweetest part? They had no idea how high it would fly or how much they would eventually crave a taste. Part 4. The sweetness. Freedom tasted like Mateo's first successful, large-scale delivery to all 12 Urban Grind locations, flawlessly executed by Raj. It tasted like the check from a high-end home goods store that picked up Anya's linens for a seasonal collection, negotiated by Chloe to ensure Anya received 70 of the retail price. It tasted like Betty's joyful tears when her jams landed in the gourmet section of a regional supermarket chain. Her small kitchen, now officially a licensed commercial space, thanks to Chloe navigating the bureaucratic maze. Artisan uplift blossomed. Chloe rented a tiny, sunlit office space above a bookstore downtown. It was bare bones, second-hand furniture, plants rescued from clearance racks, but it was hers. Raj became full-time, handling the growing logistical complexity. Chloe hired Eleanor, a retired accountant with a no-nonsense attitude and a surprisingly deep understanding of small business finances, to manage the books and payroll. The team was small, dedicated, and shared Chloe's passion for lifting up the makers. The business model evolved. Beyond basic consultancy, Artisan Uplift offered tiered membership packages: Essential, bookkeeping, basic online setup; Growth, marketing, sales channel development, event coordination; and Premier, full-scale business management, including HR and financial strategy for established artisans. Chloe focused on building sustainable businesses for her clients, not dependency. She hosted monthly workshops on topics like social media marketing and pricing strategies, fostering peer learning. The Artisan Uplift Network became a powerful force, allowing small producers to access bulk pricing on supplies, share equipment, and cross-promote. Success bred visibility. A local lifestyle magazine did a feature, The Connector: How Chloe Carter is Building an Artisan Empire from the Ground Up. The article mentioned her humble beginnings and her unique perspective gained from the corporate world, but Viridian went unnamed. Chloe gave the quotes, but the photos featured her beaming clients holding their products, their pride, the real story. The article landed like a grenade in the hushed marble foyer of Viridian Ventures. Madison Rossi practically vibrated with outrage when she saw it, thrusting the glossy page under Simon's nose. "Look, that little nobody. She's profiting from what she learned here. We should sue." Simon Thorne read the article slowly, his expression growing grimmer with each paragraph. He saw the mention of the urban grind contract, the one Viridian had vaguely pursued but dismissed as too small-scale, too operational. He saw the quotes from Janice Walsh praising Artisan Uplift's game-changing efficiency and unique value proposition. He saw the photo of Chloe, looking confident, capable, and utterly beyond his reach, surrounded by thriving small business owners. She hadn't just survived. She'd built something tangible, respected, and increasingly profitable right under his nose, using the very indifference he'd shown as her catalyst. The sweet revenge wasn't Chloe seeking them out. It was their own dawning realization of what they'd lost, what they'd enabled. It was the gnawing knowledge that the person they'd dismissed as insignificant was now a recognized force in a vibrant sector they'd ignored. It was the bitter pill of irrelevance swallowed in the face of her tangible success. Simon dismissed Madison's squawking about lawsuits. "On what grounds, Madison?" he asked wearily, rubbing his temples. "She broke no laws. She stole no clients we were actively pursuing. She outmaneuvered us in a market we deemed beneath us." The truth was galling. Viridian, chasing the next billion-dollar app, had been blindsided by the value in community, authenticity, and small-scale excellence, values Chloe had harnessed perfectly. Brad tried to downplay it. "It's just a fluff piece, Simon. Local magazine? Who cares?" Simon didn't answer. He cared. He cared because it highlighted a failure of vision. He cared because Chloe Carter, the coffee-stained intern, had seen opportunity where he saw only noise. He cared because her success was a quiet, persistent rebuke to his own judgment. A few weeks later, the final, most satisfying note of revenge played itself out, orchestrated not by Chloe, but by the market itself. Viridian Ventures hit a rough patch. a major investment in a hyped tech startup imploded spectacularly. Portfolio companies underperformed. The board grew restless. Simon Thorne, the golden boy, found himself under pressure to diversify, to find recession-resistant or authenticity-driven investments, buzzwords that felt uncomfortably familiar. His analysts scrambled. Reports were generated on the experiential economy, maker movement, and localism. The data pointed towards resilience and growth in precisely the sector Artisan Uplift dominated. One name kept surfacing as a key player, a consolidator, a trusted gatekeeper: Artisan Uplift Consulting. Simon stared at the recommendation in a board prep document. Potential strategic acquisition partnership: Artisan Uplift Consulting, market leader in artisan business support, strong network effects. Proven revenue model, significant growth potential, estimated valuation 5 to 7 million. The number made him physically recoil. 5 to 7 million. For the company built by the girl he'd paid $18 an hour to fetch coffee and absorb abuse. The sheer brutal irony was exquisite. He couldn't avoid it. The board wanted options. Swallowing his pride felt like gulping shards of glass. He instructed his assistant to set up a meeting with Chloe Carter, CEO of Artisan Uplift Consulting. Frame it as exploratory, potential synergies. The email arrived in Chloe's inbox one Tuesday morning. She read it aloud to Raj and Eleanor in the sunny little office. Dear Miss Carter, Simon Thorne, managing partner at Viridian Ventures, requests the opportunity to meet with you at your earliest convenience to discuss potential areas of mutual interest and strategic alignment between our firms. Raj choked on his coffee. No freaking way. Eleanor just raised a perfectly penciled eyebrow. The vultures come circling when the lamb is fattest, dear. Chloe leaned back in her chair, the morning sun warming her face. She looked at the email, then out the window at the bustling street below. A street filled with small businesses, with people building things with their hands and hearts. She thought of Betty's Jam Kitchen, Mateo's flour-dusted bakery, Anya's quiet studio filled with colorful threads. She thought of the coffee stain, Simon's indifference, Madison's sneer. A slow, deep smile spread across her face. It wasn't cruel. It was the smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. The sugar had cooked down. It was thick. It was rich. It was irresistibly, perfectly sweet. She hit reply. Dear Mr. Thorne, thank you for your interest in Artisan Uplift Consulting. My schedule is currently quite full, supporting our growing community of artisan partners. However, my business development manager, Raj Patel, would be happy to discuss our standard consultancy rates and available service packages with you or a member of your team at a time convenient for him. Please find his contact information below. Best regards, Chloe Carter, CEO, Artisan Uplift Consulting. She copied Raj, adding a single line. Raj, feel free to charge them the corporate interest premium rate. Raj burst out laughing. Eleanor chuckled, a dry, satisfied sound. Chloe closed her laptop. The past was past. Her future, and the future of the makers she championed, was bright, bustling, and deliciously sweet. The best revenge wasn't destruction. It was creation. And hers was just getting started. She had a workshop on sustainable packaging to lead. The real work, the meaningful work, awaited.